Hey guys, Chris Collard here with Gone Jeepin' and 1941 Media. Last episode we did the Dana 30. Guess what we're doing this week? We're going through the AMC 20. So one of those ubiquitous axles from the Jeep era of lore. AMC 20, we've got a Eaton TrueTrac, parts from Sear Gear and Axle, Moser Axle, and I'm super excited because it is going to be brand new from lug to lug. So hope you can join us, stick around. All right guys, so that wraps up the Dana 30, right? How did it go, Jim?
Pretty smooth. Made a couple minor adjustments here and there, but it was pretty close right off the bat. We just needed a little bit of tweaking after that.
So we're wrapped up. Now what do we got in front of us?
AMC Model 20.
Yeah.
You don't see very many of them anymore.
So as you guys know, obviously this is Elda's original OE factory axle, so it's going to get a facelift. We're going to be putting new gears in from Cherokee, another Eaton TrueTrac. Elda is going to be loving life. So I'd say we get started.
Yep. The things that you need to make sure that you keep the carrier bearing caps specific to which side they came off of, and they are specific to individual housing. So if you can see, the pinion's moving in and out some. It's not much, but it's some, and that's just due to a lot of life on the bearings and a lot of miles and a lot of usage, which is good that we're replacing all of those. So this one doesn't have the slinger on the front. This slide hammer to pull the axle tube seals out so that we can get those out and replace them. Again, just cleaning out the old silicone from the bolt holes so that when you put a new bolt in there, it doesn't hydrolock the bolt and snap it. So we're going to replace the rear yoke just like we did with the front, because there's a groove in it from the seal riding on it. Believe it or not, a rubber seal can groove a steel yoke, and you can actually see and feel it. So it's a pretty substantial groove, but luckily we carry these yokes in stock, and it's something that we can fix right here today. So in the front we've got the same thing, and in the rear we're doing it once again because they work really well. A Detroit TrueTrac, and like I was saying, they're a gear-driven limited slip, pretty much bulletproof. They can be as aggressive as you want them, and as mild as you need them to be, and get you to go just about anywhere. So this is just a seal driver that I've made. It works for a couple of different applications, but it's roughly the same outside diameter as the seal, so that when you're driving the seal in, you're not driving it in crooked or off square or something like that. It helps you drive it in center. Should be good. So now that we've got our seals in the axle tubes, we're going to move forward with installing the bearing races and pinion seal into the housing, as well as installing the carrier bearings onto the carrier. This is one of the race drivers that I use. The bearing sits on it like that, and it just helps installing these pinion bearing races. Makes it a much faster job to do. Got our pinion seal installed with a little bit of assembly lube on the pinion bearing, so that when we go to set preload, everything spins smoothly. The Model 20 shims are pretty thin, and it's hard to use an adjustable shim kit with them, so occasionally you'll have to shim underneath the carrier bearing, even though they don't do that from the factory. But TrueTracs are a pretty precise unit and they don't require too much shimming, so I'm going to start at least with how it was from the factory with no shims underneath the carrier bearing. And as before, I'm just double checking to make sure that the bearing seats on there all the way, and the carrier bearing, the inner race, that there's no light gap with it. And I could initially see a little bit of a gap there, so you just want to make sure that it seats all the way, because otherwise it's going to really mess you up when you go to try to set your backlash. A Model 20 gear set uses a crush sleeve as opposed to the shim stack that we used on the Dana 30, and it goes onto the pinion like that, and the front pinion bearing's going to go here. And you tighten it down in this crush sleeve. It does, like the name suggests, it crushes, and that's what sets your preload. You tighten it until you get your desired amount of inch-pounds of rotational preload. Instead of changing thicknesses of shim, you're crushing this sleeve. So I put oil on the flange of the nut to help lubricate it while I'm crushing the crush sleeve, so that I'm not fighting the friction between the nut and the yoke while I'm trying to crush the crush sleeve. In addition to a little bit of Loctite on the threads of the nut, it helps, even though the nut's a mechanical lock nut, it helps make sure that nothing backs off and everything stays nice and tight. You'll know when it's starting to get tight, because you'll be able to hear a tone change with the impact gun, similar to a tone change when you're driving in the bearing race. And then from there, it's a tighten it, check it sort of deal. So right at 15 inch-pounds, just like with the Dana 30. This one's probably a touch over, but with bigger pinion bearings, it's going to be just fine the way it is. I'm just making sure that the caps are, since it seemed a little funky when we took it apart, which cap was on which side. I'm just feeling the machine mark or groove in there to make sure that they feel like they make a perfect circle and line up properly, because if they don't, they can squeeze your carrier bearing kind of weird and cause premature carrier bearing failure. But it feels pretty good. This shim is about 10 thousandths thicker than this one. With no backlash, with the bearing caps off, it would probably lock it up solid with the bearing caps tightened down. So I need to add probably 20 thousandths to this side and take 20 thousandths out of this side. Use my So we've got the rear set up right where we want it. The backlash is right at 11 thousandths, and the pattern's nice in the middle, nicely in the middle of both the drive and the coast side on the teeth. So we're gonna call this one done and ready to go, and it's gonna be much better than it was previously.
All right, guys, so you can tell a man's got to know his limitations. So when it comes to differentials, I just need to like step back and let the pros do what they do best. I felt that it went pretty good, Sam.
Yeah, it's pretty smooth. You know, you always got to fiddle with them a little bit. Occasionally you get lucky and you toss them in with the shims that came out of them, and it sets up exactly how you want them to.
Well, anytime the camera's rolling, you know there's something's going to come up. So we did have to, you had to pull it out, reshim,
A couple of times.
check the preload again, check
Yeah.
the pattern. But this final, when we finally got to, both the front 30 and this AMC 20, they're looking really,
Nice.
really good.
Yeah, nice and fresh.
I mean, Ed's going to be happy. Anything else you want to add to that?
No?
Well, I totally appreciate the time, and this kind of wraps up our day at Ring Pinion Services. So super excited from Sierra Gear and Axle. We've got new ring and pinions, bearings. We've got an Eaton TrueTrac differential in the front and the back, and in the front 30, we've got a set of Sierra Gear's chromoly axles, 4340 chromoly axles. So we're styling. This Jeep is coming together, and in 8 days we'll be up on Jeepers Jamboree. So I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Stick with us. It's going to be fun.